More Cade McNamara injury updates. It's dominated the conversation. We have more for you today. Plus, I go on record my season predictions today. Locked On Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you get podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Another day, another update as the saga continues in the world of Hawkeye football. That's right. The will he, won't he question of Cade McNamara continues. And as we continue throughout this week, it looks more and more like he is going to be out there and is going to be the starter for the game against Utah State. We'll talk about that Aggie squad a little bit later here today. Also make my prediction on the season, but we have to open up with the thing that has really dominated the conversation over the last couple of weeks after we saw him go down in the open practice, the kids' day practice. And which is crazy to think is if Cade McNamara was not injured at the open practice, if it happened in any of the other practices during August camp, would we have known about it? Would we have had any indication that this has turned out what it was? You could have heard the term that Kirk Ferentz likes to throw around, a soft tissue injury, and maybe that was it. But I think it's led us to understand just the significance of this injury. Now, the question still remains, how is he going to react going out there, playing in game action, not being able to wear the gold jersey like he does in practice where he's not going to be hit? It's different out there. And Utah State's going to be coming for him. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But this is what Kirk Ferentz had to say last evening during the Hawk Talk radio program with Gary Dolphin that airs weekly across the radio airwaves and all the affiliates across the state. And he said this, as I bring up the quote here and find it verbatim, want to get it exactly what Kirk Ferentz had to say. We'll take it right up to game time, but we're expecting him to play. Based on what I've seen the last 2 days, I feel optimistic, but we'll have to see what happens. A lot of caveats there. And we've seen this a lot of places. In fact, we saw it with one of the best reporters out there in the college football space, and that is Pete Thamal, now with ESPN. He also had an update yesterday during College Football Live, and he had this to say. This is from Pete Thamal of ESPN. Quote, a little bit of good news out of Iowa. Spoke to some sources this morning, and the prevailing thought is, as of today, there's an expectation that Cade McNamara will go. He suffered a quad injury at practice about 2 weeks ago. He has an extremely high competitive level and an extremely high pain threshold. The thought is that he can go. Probably won't run him very much, probably play pretty conservative and limited, which is the way Iowa likes to play anyway. The strength of Iowa's offense is 2 tight ends, so expect a ton of 12 personnel and expect Cade McNamara to go as of right now, but to be slightly limited. And that is what Pete Thamal had to say during College Football Live. So there's the update, and an update that doesn't really change where we are. As I told you 2 weeks ago, Cade McNamara was targeting coming back. The injury proved to be more significant than some people were leading you to believe, yet here we are. And as we go through this one, the will he, won't he question, Kirk said they're going to take it right up to game time. Now, does right up to game time mean right up until 11:03 Central Time, as that is kickoff scheduled on FS1? Does that mean the 2 hours before when the injury report, the participation report needs to be put in by the Big Ten? That we do not know exactly what he is saying as it pertains to that. Optimism, but both Pete Thamal and Kirk Ferentz, they threw those caveats in there. Optimistic, throwing those buzzwords out there. It's no sure thing. Anybody telling you that it's a sure thing right now still doesn't know. That's where we are in this process. Want to see him play. I think getting the reps are incredibly important, getting the understanding of what the Iowa scheme is going to be. And I think all of us as fans, we just want to see it. Look, we've been served a crap sandwich offensively the last couple of years. We want some just absolutely deplorable football out there. We want to see something good. We want to have hope. We want to have that optimism that I have maintained all throughout the spring and summer this year. I want to see it. It's Christmas Eve, right? And we're ready to open up that present. We're so excited for it. And now, I know what? Actually, we're going to move it to the 26th. You got to wait another day. No, we don't want that. We want to see Cade McNamara out there. We want to see him playing at a high level. We want to see him taking shots up the field. We want to see an offensive line that can protect. We want to see all the things that we've wanted to believe through this offseason. And it's just thrown this wrench into things. And it brings you back to just all the times that being a Hawkeye fan, when you think you have it by the short hairs, and then it just doesn't turn out that way. From Ricky Stancy going down in the end zone against Northwestern, from the injuries that derailed the 2016 season, the close losses of 2010, looking back at 2002 and what could have been if Brad Banks didn't have his hand wrapped too tight against Iowa State, maybe an undefeated season. 1985, and what happened losing in the rain against Ohio State. What could have been in the Rose Bowl if there was maybe not some extra things that were happening at that point in time. Just on and on and on. We can play this game forever because we're Hawkeye fans and we have these memories and all these what ifs. And I would hate to see this season derailed by a what if. Not getting Cade McNamara. Speaking of Cade McNamara, you can find this. I retweeted it on X on Twitter. An article from Fox Sports. Now, Fox Sports, a couple years ago, remember they went away from actually writing? What a weird decision. They were pivoting to video. That didn't work. Well, they do have articles back up now on foxsports.com, including a great one about Cade McNamara. Now, it talks a ton about his time at Michigan, talks about the decision and what happened and ultimately kind of how it played out with him and J.J. McCarthy fighting for the starting job. But there was plenty of aspects to now his time in Iowa City. His dad talked about how this is the happiest that he has been as a college athlete and what he brings. And you hear Michigan people talk about Cade McNamara. You hear from Jim Harbaugh to other people involved in the program, calling him one of the great Michigan men, calling him a legend. This is a guy that saved Jim Harbaugh's job. This is a guy that very well is going to go down in lore. He brought them their first Big Ten title in almost 2 decades at Michigan, not Iowa, Michigan. And he was the guy that delivered it. He is revered. He is beloved still in Michigan, even after transferring away. There's not many athletes that can pull that off. Cade McNamara is that. He is dynamic as a leader, and that's what gets you excited. The leadership qualities, the intangibles that he have, they're through the roof. They're absolutely unmeasurable. Have we talked this thing to death? Yeah, we have. And I hope we can get through another show without talking about it and just talking some football. In fact, we're going to do that when we come back. Let's make some season predictions. We're going to make these predictions anticipating Cade McNamara is good to go all season long. We're not going to worry about that. Season predictions for Iowa football. How close will I be? We will get into that. Plus, we'll take a look at Utah State. What do we anticipate we're going to see out on the field at Kinnick Stadium coming up on Saturday, starting at 11:03 with the kickoff? We'll get into that as we roll through here. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. If you heard me before, I have my own small business. I have different people that I have to hire for different aspects of it. It can be incredibly tedious if you're self-employed, if you have a small business, trying to find those right candidates. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find those people very quickly. Post the job for free, a huge part of it as well. All you do, add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile. That spreads the word that you're hiring. And it has simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview in hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Again, that's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Trent Condon back with you once again on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. That's what we do here on the Locked On Network. Doesn't matter your team, we got you covered. Of course, you're a Hawkeye fan. You're hanging out here with us, but your NFL team, your NBA team, Major League Baseball going into the final month of the season, we got you covered there and a whole lot more. From Locked On Fantasy Football, Locked On Bets, you name it, we got you covered here on the Locked On Network. Let's get into the Hawkeyes, and it's time to either look great or look like a moron. And more times than not, I look like a moron for a myriad of different reasons. But let's make my predictions for the season here as we run through and take a look at the upcoming season. If you've been listening to me for a while, two things. This is something that, in general, I've been very good at, as I've been on the radio airwaves for just about 2 decades now, and something on a year-to-year basis I've been very good. I was one of the few people that believed in the 2009 team. I had them winning the Big Ten championship. They went on to the Orange Bowl, of course, finished a game out of it. The narrative that year, well, they're not going to be able to go on the road in that gauntlet of a schedule that they had, and they absolutely did. Had to win against Penn State, had to win against Michigan State, and nearly the win against Ohio State. So I've been good for the most part. I didn't see 2015 happening. I didn't have that team going 12-0, and I don't have this team going 12-0. I also, though, have them improving. You start right there. Now, the win total when it came out at FanDuel earlier this summer, it opened up at 7.5. That's not the case anymore. The number is 8.5, meaning you bet over means you think they're going to be 9-3 or better, and you go under, they're going to be 8-4 or worse. So I bet the over. Right when it came out at 7.5, I jumped aboard that one. A year ago, they won 7 football games in the regular season with having as bad of an offensive line as they've had since 1999. Having quarterback play that was absolutely brutal, from Spencer Petras to Alex Padilla. It just was awful. There's no two ways about it. A wide receiver group that played at times with one scholarship wide receiver out there, and they were still able to do that. And even if you think the defense is going to take some kind of step back this year, and I think that is reality. Yeah, the defensive line stout. The starters at the defensive back position, you feel good about. Higgins and Jackson at linebacker, you feel good. It's the depth that still has me concerned outside of defensive line defensively. And they just played at such a ridiculous level last year. It's hard to duplicate that in back-to-back years. But the offense is going to take a big step forward. And we start right there as we get into the non-core portion of the schedule. I think Iowa opens up Saturday, and it's not going to be a dominating victory. This is not going to be like the last time that Utah State came in to town in 2002 and Iowa was able to just blitzkrieg them out of the building. I believe a young Clinton Solomon had a big play in that game. That's one thing I remember. The other one, it was on the heels of the loss to Iowa State that year, where Iowa blew the 24-7 halftime lead. They also led Utah State 24-7. We're going to stay with that number. We're going to stick with it, and Iowa cruised in that one and won it by a lot more. Iowa wins this one 24-7. Limited Cade McNamara, simplified playbook, get the ground game going. Caleb Johnson goes off. He has a monster performance, and Iowa's off to the races at 1-0. Then it's the road trip to Iowa State. And say what you will about Iowa State. Last year, 4-8, a team that obviously the gambling suspensions hit them much harder than what we saw in Iowa City. But that defense is still really good. And they're going to be really good, I believe, again this season. Defensive line will have some new faces, certainly the case of linebacker. That defensive backfield is as good as anybody, certainly in the Big 12 and maybe across the country with what they have. They got some big-time playmakers back there. And the Haycock scheme, it is really, really good. There is a reason that a number of NFL teams went to Iowa State, went to Ames to find out what they were doing defensively to slow down spread offenses. Haycock's excellent. He's really, really good, and this is going to be another one of those grinded out games. But more than anything, I believe in Cade McNamara. I believe about the improvements of this team offensively, and Iowa gets it done. A ho-hum 20-10 road win against Iowa State in week number 2. We move on to week number 3. In week 3, that means it is the final tune-up before Big Ten play, as it'll be Western Michigan. Now, this Western Michigan team, they're going to be bad. This is not the Western Michigan team that came in 2007 and upended the Hawkeyes as they were fighting the last game of the year to get into bowl consideration. That is certainly not the case with this Western Michigan squad. In fact, a couple of their good players from a year ago, they're all playing up for the old coach at Western Michigan, Phil Fleck, up at Minnesota, and they had some transfers. Western Michigan, this thing is, we get into the 25 points per game, right? And what Brian Ferentz has to do to have his contract, get the bonus that he lost back, get the 2-year rolling contract back, needs to get to the 25 points per game and 7 wins or more. This is the one where you put it on. This is the one where you come out there, hopefully at that point, a completely healthy Cade McNamara. He's riding the ship. You get it. You get into a laugher here. You're able to play all the reserves during the fourth quarter, and I think they will do just that. Iowa 45-10 against Western Michigan. They are 3-0 on the season, and with it, I believe that Iowa is going to be up in the top 15 of college football. That sets up the showdown with Penn State. It'll be a night game. The last time Iowa was there, I was in State College for a whiteout. That was 2009, an incredibly cold, rainy day in State College, but boy, was it fun. The opening play, not so fun. After Iowa, of course, knocked them out of the national championship conversation in 2008. All they were talking about was payback. Be ready. We'll be ready for you. And the first play of the game, they were. But Iowa was just too good. They physically dominated the play, and the game changed on the Adrian Claiborne block punt that he brought back for a touchdown. Iowa takes the lead, late touchdown, and wins it 21-10. Turnabout is fair play. And I still, with the questions that I have, how good is this offensive line? You look at the defensive front for what Penn State has and what they have certainly coming off the edge. That's where my concerns about Jennings Dunker certainly come forward, and guys like that on the outside, the offensive line in general. I have this one going to the Nittany Lions. Iowa hangs tough. They cover, as Iowa's a double-digit dog in this one currently with some of the look-ahead lines that are out there. But Penn State wins this one, and Iowa takes their first loss of the season, 20-13. So now it's time to bounce back. And that's what this team is going to have to do. Look, the schedule's front-loaded this year, right? It is a very front-loaded schedule for the Hawkeyes in Big Ten play, what they have and what they're going to face. So it is Michigan State. Now, Michigan State's such a weird team. 2 years ago, Mel Tucker looked like he had just an absolutely behemoth of a team. They ran Kenneth Walker out to a great season, and then a huge step back last year. Then this offseason, they lose their starting quarterback. They lose their best wide receiver to the transfer portal, and not at the normal time you anticipate guys are going to leave for the transfer portal. They're still good up front. Michigan State's offensive and defensive lines are still going to be very good. I don't think this is going to be a laugher. I just don't see how Sparty is able to score a ton in this one. I think this one comes down to the wire, but Iowa finds a way to get back on the right side of things as they win it 17-13 over Michigan State. Are you sensing a trend here? We go to the next Big Ten tilt, another home game. This will be under the lights at Kinnick Stadium for homecoming, normally at 11 o'clock kickoff. Not the case this year as Purdue makes their way to Iowa City. Last year, Iowa exercised a ton of demons against the Boilermakers. That defense was so good that day and slowing down Aiden O'Connell and the rest of the Purdue offense. Going to be a new look, going to be much different, obviously, defensively, as Ryan Walters, the former defensive coordinator at Illinois, makes his way over and now is the head coach. And they're going to go even more up-tempo. Like they love to chuck it around in the Brown offense. They're going to do it even more. Graham Harrell's their new offensive coordinator. How complimentary is that football to be played with what you want to do defensively in Walters and what they're going to try to do offensively? Still, this can be a tough one. I think Iowa, though, this is the time that the offense gets rolling and they win it 27-23 and run their record to 5-1. Here's another biggie. It's the road trip to Wisconsin. I am not a big believer in this Wisconsin team, the transformation that they have to make. I think a part of it is what we saw back in spring and their open practice where Mordecai, their quarterback from SMU, who transferred in, he was completely lost. The offense was lost. Was it 5 interceptions in the spring game? He was sacked something like 8, 9, 10 times. It was awful. Now, everything that we've heard is now they're starting to gain their footing. And Phil Longo, their new offensive coordinator, you hear about what he does offensively, and you think they're just going to be chucking the ball around. Some of his best teams in North Carolina, in fact, a couple of years ago, he had 2 different 1,000-yard rushers. And they're just going to go out there and they're going to say, you know what, we're going to spread you out. And we're still going to run it. hopefully we get a cold day. Hopefully we get one where Mordecai maybe hasn't played in those kind of conditions before. That's what I'm hoping for in this one. Another slugfest, another one that comes down to the wire. Being in Madison, I'm going to give the slight edge to the Badgers as they get it done 16-14 over the Hawkeyes, and Wisconsin puts themselves in control for the Big Ten West title. After that, it is Minnesota. That one does scare me. Yes, Iowa and Kirk Ferentz have absolutely owned the Gophers. They haven't won at Kinnick Stadium since the 90s, but just something about that coming off the physical game like it'll be against Wisconsin. I do have some concerns about that game. Ultimately, as has been the case under Kirk Ferentz against Phil Fleck, Iowa finds a way. A bounce goes the right way. Iowa wins it in a nail biter. A walk-off field goal, 2019. The Hawkeyes get the win. After a bye, it's a trip to Wrigley to take on Northwestern. Got to get some points up because we are not close to averaging 25 points a game at this point, and they do just that. Iowa cruises against the Wildcats. It's a party in Wrigleyville as Iowa wins it 38-10 against the Wildcats. We go next to Rutgers as they come to town. Hey, another spot where Iowa can put some points on the board, and they do that once again. 34-14, Iowa with the big home win against Rutgers. Here's another toughie, though, as Illinois and Bielema come in. Another one, much like the Minnesota game. Being at home, I think Iowa gets it done. Little revenge from last year and that hideous-looking football game that was played over in Champaign. Not going to be quite as low scoring as the one we saw there, but Iowa gets it done. 23-17 Iowa with the win against Illinois, and setting this up, a road trip to Nebraska at the end of the year, and for the second straight time, Iowa will be playing for a division title. Of course, it didn't go the Hawkeyes' way last year. Well, you say, Condon, what are you talking about? You already had Iowa losing to Wisconsin. I believe that there's going to be 3 losses on the Badgers' schedule. Obviously have them losing to Ohio State. I also have them dropping one of the road tilts either at Purdue or at Illinois in the earlier portions of the schedule. And then late in the year, both Nebraska and at Minnesota. I think Nebraska is going to be playing better. I think Iowa's going to be an opportunity to get back to the title tilt, and Cade McNamara leads them there, and he'll get a shot in the Big Ten championship game this time coming out of the West as opposed to the East like it was 2 years ago. I got Iowa 10-2. I have them winning the Big Ten West, and I have them playing a rematch against Penn State. That's right. I do not have Ohio State there. I do not have Michigan there. I love this Penn State team. I love the talent, and I believe Drew Aller is going to be the guy that's going to lead them to the Big Ten championship game this year. Alas, the Hawkeyes pulled the upset, 11-2 with the win in the Big Ten title game. Hey, go big or go home. We're going big here, and I just want to believe. We finish things up. We look forward to game 1. How do we get there? Well, it starts at 1-0. We'll tell you a little bit about Utah State. We'll do that as we continue on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks as always for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're on the podcast side, 5-star reviews helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. College football season is here, and this season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live each Friday. Locked On is going to go live from 10 to noon Central Time on every one of the Locked On College YouTube channels. College Football Kickoff Live, going to cover everything going on in college football, from the playoff conversation, big rivalry games, in depth like only Locked On can, including insights and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday. It's from 10 a.m. to noon on any Locked On College YouTube channel, including right here with Locked On Hawkeyes. You won't want to miss it. Utah State, bowl team a year ago. They went 6-6. Got off to a slow start last season and came back, won 5 of 6 down the stretch. Played pretty well down the stretch, and certainly credit to that team and that program being able to bounce back after what looked to be shaping up for a really, really rough season. They returned their quarterback. That is the starting point when you're talking about Utah State, a guy that is a dual threat. He can move around. He can make some plays. Blake Anderson, their head coach, one of just a guy that's easy to root for. He's had tragedy in his life, and he has bounced back. He's won at a couple of places that aren't exactly easy to win, down in Arkansas State and now here at Utah State. He's done a good job throughout his career. In fact, in his first season at Utah State 2 years ago, they won double-digit games. They won the Mountain West. That's no pushover, winning the Mountain West. Not a ton of guys back, though, outside of the quarterback. You start right there. That remains a question mark for the team as they bring back Cooper Legas, their quarterback. Threw a lot of picks last year. Didn't have a ton of experience. They hope, obviously, that those interceptions are going to be cut down this year. Defensively, though, I think that's something to keep an eye on. They're going to play a lot of different things. They're a team that is going to mix it up. They have a new defensive coordinator coming in this year. So even if it's Cade McNamara, yes, you're very hopeful that he will be able to figure everything out. He's seen everything in college football, and you're not too worried about that. However, if it is Deacon Hill, or if they have to rely more on Deacon Hill, and they have kind of a pitch count on McNamara, if they get out to a good lead and are able to sit on it, Utah State's going to do a lot of different things and try to confuse the quarterbacks out there. That's what we have from Utah State. A couple of good receivers out there also that are returning this season. We'll see about what they are up front. And this Iowa defensive line can absolutely just dominate football games with the depth that they have and just the waves and waves of guys that they're going to be throwing out there. That's what we'll be looking for. We'll talk about it a little bit more tomorrow as we will be joined by LaShawn Daniels, breaking things down on Iowa football. Get you set for the weekend. Get you set for the tailgating. Make sure you get some Swarm beer. Speaking of Swarm, and the NIL, the collective with the University of Iowa and the Swarm. Kirk Ferentz had a video. I retweeted it on the Locked On Hawkeyes account. You can also find that. Lots of things going on over there. Give us a follow. Give me a follow at Trent Condon. Locked On Iowa is the name of the X or Twitter account. That's where you can find us over there. And we will be with you tomorrow talking more football with LaShawn Daniels. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.